it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Oh, I wore my cat shirt for Auk and Zoya. See little cat.
Yay!
Thank you.
The people who follow my channel from the very beginning, I just went live, by the way, because it usually takes a few minutes for people to get here, and I'm gonna tweet the fact that we're live. People that follow my channel, they know that and watch me learn as I was going, and that's pretty much been the entire step. But anyway, we're live now. Fred Hampton Leftist, thank you guys for watching. I have my friends with us, the people who follow my channel, people that know the content that we like to cover. Police abolition is an issue that is very important to me, and I cover it very on a regular basis. And one group that I was getting involved with very early on was 10 Demands, because they actually want to solve these problems and actually have very good conversation with these people. So I have them back, Awkward, and on. We have Zoya as well. Welcome to the show, guys. Let me tweet the link out. How you guys doing?
I'm glad to be here, man.
I'm gonna say discussing police abolition with 10 demands. If you guys are watching now, let us know when you are here. Like I said, it usually takes a while for people to get in. We already got a few viewers here. This series, we already did one before, because for people who are not familiar, 10 Demands, obviously the name implies we got 10 demands. We actually want to put, giving people a roadmap, an actual guide, and a way to put actual pressure on a local level. So we discussed the first demand, actually defunding the police and laying that out. We have that. I think that's on the 10 Demand YouTube channel. Is that correct?
On the YouTube channel and on the website. Yep.
Okay. So we're live right now. Once we get into the replay, I'll actually put the link in the description if you're watching the replay of this. So if you want to watch the first episode, check that out. But the topic we are covering right now, and once again, this is something I cover a lot on my show, is the militarization of the police. And that is what the second demand covers. I want to toss it to Zoya, and I want her to kind of give a basic outline of what we have here on what we asking for the second demand.
So first, I'm going to go into some history of how we even got here. So the militarization of police is the use of military equipment and tactics by law enforcement officers. This includes the use of armored personnel carriers, assault rifles, submachine guns, flashbang grenades, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, and SWAT. Now, new Emory data analysis finds that militarizing police does not reduce crime. But there's a deep history of how cops came to act and look like their military counterparts. The key shift actually came in earnest after World War II. Law enforcement officers returning from war viewed Black protesters the same as the enemy. We have to reckon with how he became a captain overseeing the military occupation of areas conquered by the Allies. When he returned, he transplanted many of the methods he had learned overseas to his hometown. Parker despised the idea of community policing. For Parker, policing was more akin to an occupation. The result of his reforms was a militarized department that was overwhelmingly white. This set Los Angeles up for disaster. In the Watts riots in 1965, Parker described policing rioters as akin to fighting the Viet Cong, as if city residents angry over racial injustices were a bunch of communist guerrillas. His deputy and soon-to-be successor, Daryl Gates, began taking officers to a nearby Marines training camp to learn counterinsurgency tactics for the streets of Los Angeles. This marked the change in policing. Historians describe how police forces came to view their jobs as a Vietnam at home. As race riots became more commonplace during 1960s, so did counterinsurgency tactics. In Los Angeles, Gates created the first special weapons and tactics team, which quickly became a model for other cities. The members of these SWAT units, most of whom had served in either the Korean or Vietnam Wars, spent their days learning what Gates himself described as the history of guerrilla warfare, scouting and patrolling, night operations, camouflage and concealment, combat in buildup areas, and ambushes. At the request of the Kerner Commission, which studied the causes of the 1967 riots in Detroit, New York, and beyond, Gates devised a model civil disturbance plan that could be distributed to police departments across the country. He proposed the departments be organized along military lines and that officers start reading military manuals called The Guerrilla and How to Fight Him, as well as combat in fortified and build-up areas. Gates also recommended reading guerrilla warfare manuals by Che Guevara to quote unquote know the enemy. Then a growing number of think tanks, policymakers, and defense analysts argued for training police officers in the latest, greatest tactics of counterinsurgency. Beginning in 1968, the Army began offering CDOC, Senior Officers Civil Disturbance Orientation course, to introduce high-ranking officers to military tactics that could be used to contain civilians. All of this has a distinct racial problem, as the communities on the receiving end of newly militarized police forces tended to be Black or Hispanic. Proponents of militarized policing, though, insisted that it was the police who were the real victims. Parker himself declared at a civil rights hearing that it was the police who were the greatest dislocated minority in America. In 1968, Congress created a new entity known as the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, which facilitated the transfer of military technologies for use by police forces. Until its demise in 1982, the LEAA gave police forces surplus military equipment such as helicopters, body armor, and armored vehicles, as well as sophisticated computer equipment and mapping tools. The already blurry line between the police and the military became even more so in the 1970s, thanks to the war on drugs. Launched in 1971 by Nixon, this military-style assault on social problems spurred legislation that gave legal cover to no-knock raids and preventative detention. But it also paved the way for the use of military resources in domestic law enforcement, such as spy planes searching for drug fields. In 1981, Congress passed the Military Cooperation with Civilian Law Enforcement Act, which replaced the smaller LEAA. It enabled domestic law enforcement access to far more resources, more military equipment, supplies, bases, and other assistance. In 1989, Congress gave the Pentagon temporary authority to give equipment that was no longer being used by the military to local police departments. Armored vehicles, planes, rifles, scopes, grenades, bayonets, nearly everything was on the table, so long as the military deemed it suitable in counter-drug activities. The origins of 1033, which refers to the numbered section of the 1997 NDAA that granted permanent authority to the Secretary of Defense to transfer defense material to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, lies in America's forever wars on drugs, crime, and terror. The trickle of military supplies then became a flood, thanks in part to this establishment of the 1033 program in 1997, which formalized and expanded a set of existing programs designed to give police access to military supplies. Best part is the Department of Defense could now transfer excess military equipment to cops for free, and the equipment has sometimes vanished due to lack of oversight. Since 2001, police departments have acquired everything from attack helicopters to grenade launchers, never mind more garden variety weapons like M16 rifles. SWAT rates have also increased drastically, and 20% of cops served in the military.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give some historical background.
It is not the only one. Yes, absolutely. And what's crazy is that there's no evidence, not only that the 1033 program or police militarization makes our communities safer, it doesn't even make the cops safer, and it doesn't save taxpayer money. In addition to being able to get all of this military grade weaponry for free, these municipalities and states are also every year increasing their police budgets. So it's not like they're taking this free equipment and saying we can take less money out of the school budget or other services that are desperately needed. So we're not keeping anyone safer, and we're still spending the same amount of money. Since its inception, actually, the 1033 program has resulted in nearly 10,000 jurisdictions receiving more than $7 billion of equipment. It's, as Zoya said, it's been used in police raids, as well as police violence against protesters, obviously including the recent protests for racial justice. Of the more than $7 billion worth of equipment that's been transferred to state and local law enforcement, more than half has been transferred in the last decade. So it's actually becoming an even bigger problem every year. Since 2011, $390 million in equipment each year has been delivered to local law enforcement, distributed to more than 6,500 agencies in all 50 states and several territories. From 2011 to 2014 alone, for instance, the military distributed more than 29,000 military grade rifles to 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And perhaps the craziest part is that police militarization does not just impact police departments. These are used by K through 12 public schools and colleges as well. The K through 12 schools, colleges, and universities have received millions of dollars of heavily militarized equipment. As of today, state and local law enforcement possess more than 60,000 military grade rifles, 1,500 combat ready trucks and tanks, 500 unmanned ground vehicles, which are essentially landed drones, dozens of military aircraft, and much more, including a rocket launcher. This dating back to Ferguson, police were, as we know, mounting heavily armed and very violent responses to protesters there and elsewhere. And President Obama actually signed an executive order in 2015 that implemented some of the reforms the ACLU was recommending, including oversight procedures for some classes of equipment, banning a few categories of equipment, and mandating that the data about this program be made public. Of course, Donald Trump ran for office, promising to rescind Obama's restrictions. And in 2017, shortly after encouraging police brutality, to say the least, in a speech to cops in Long Island, Trump made good on his promise and rescinded the executive order. And as we were saying, the 1033 program may be the biggest, but it's not the only avenue through which the federal government funnels these type of resources into states and municipalities. State, local, and federal law enforcement agencies, domestic agencies, receive billions of dollars in funding from the Department of Justice and Homeland Security as well. So we at 10 demands, our second demand is to demilitarize police. This is something that can start right away. Until Congress can abolish the 1033 program, we can demand that President Biden put a halt on all new transfers of military equipment. And when Congress revisits the NDAA, it should abolish the 1033 program altogether. And like legalizing marijuana, for instance, it's not enough to just legalize it. And in this case, it's not enough to just make it illegal. We have to do more. We have to go the next step, which includes amending Title 10 U.S. Code, Chapter 153, that would create new protocols for the decommissioning of military equipment, meaning it could actually not be distributed domestically. And it should also include not being distributed to countries like Israel that are using them for purposes we clearly don't agree with. All of the money that is spent and all of this equipment that is distributed, we believe, just like as we defund the police and reallocate that money to the most impacted communities, as we do this after amending these protocols, we at 10 Demands recommend prioritizing economic growth, community health and safety, and environmental restoration, particularly in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities that have historically been underinvested in and excluded from government grants.
Well said. And when it comes to the additional militarization of the police and with 1033, I'm asking, is it true that they're actually increasing the flow of military supplies under Joe Biden using 1033?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It
If
wouldn't
Nick,
surprise.
if I had to guess, I would say that it's just always increasing.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And that's one of the things that with the red blue dynamic, you're not gonna see that change because the Democratic Party, I mean, their senators take more money from the police than the Republican Party do, despite a lot of people in their understanding. I do want to bring Anand in here, and I want to
Yeah.
get your kind of analysis and your breakdown on the current problem of the militarization of the police. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you just mentioned that because we had two bills passed this week that actually increase police, like that are centered on law enforcement, that increase the military and police budget. There is the Asian anti-hate crime bill, which, like Awkward said, like it's just all that that bill does is just increase grants to states and the federal government to police and more multilingual dispatchers. More, as Awkward has talked about, more police presence and more weaponry does not stop crime. For those of you who don't know what broken windows policing is, it was a theory by James Q. Wilson and George Kelling in 1982 that says that increased police presence and militarization within the community perpetuates and increases crime within that community instead of stopping it. And like I said, more police, harsher sentences and fines, and more heavily armed police are not going to stop. I mean, I'm an Asian American, so this actually, and I live in New York City, so this actually does affect me. And I know this is not going to help me or anybody like me. It's just going to be a payout to actually take in more bodies into the police and actually not stop any crime. What actually does stop hate crimes, as we talked about in demand number one, and Awkward mentioned this, is to invest in fair housing and first have to defund the police. We got to invest in fair housing, desegregate schools, change school curriculums that that encompass more ethnicities and more world history as opposed to the Eurocentric storytelling that we have in schools right now, and provide money for job training and local business development. That's actually what stops hate crimes, not funding the police more. And another bill this week that was passed was the January 6th Commission. It's a $1.9 billion giveaway to law enforcement and the Department of Justice. Again, law enforcement and more police and weaponry does not stop crime. I mean, the police were the ones who were responsible for letting those armed protesters in.
Yeah,
I mean, what would
I love that you brought that connection up between how they are using the rise of anti-Asian violence, and this is a pattern I see the establishment and the ruling class do all the
Mhm,
time, where they take a real legitimate issue. That's a real issue and
mhm,
something that we have to brainstorm real solutions to
uh-huh,
and how to fix that. But they take these instances and they use white supremacy, they use terrorism, and they use that as an excuse to expand state power. And then once they expand state power and once they have the more funding, they then turn around and use that to terrorize the black community, the left, working class movement, indigenous class movements, and so
mhm.
forth. So this is the pattern I continue to see, and it's a
Yes.
giant problem how they take advantage of these tragedies to justify these programs that, as you guys are accurately pointing out, and I'm glad you guys are, um, like giving the police militarized weapons and more funding. These are not the solutions to these problems.
Absolutely not. And like I said, for the January 6th Commission, I mean, Trump's already voted out. We need to remove Congress members like Marjorie Taylor Greene. We need to just fire those police who let them in. We don't need a commission. That's what needs to happen.
Absolutely. So,
It's
um,
interesting too. There's been since COVID this connection between Asian people and Jewish people because there are Hasidic and Orthodox communities that have been less careful, and believe me, they're not the only ones. We know of all of the people on the right who don't believe COVID's real, who've also not been careful. But certainly, like in New York City, certain communities of the more religious Jewish people have been less careful, and it's led to further persecution of all Jewish people and blaming Jews in general for the spread of COVID in a way that is not too dissimilar from the way they are blaming all Asian people for, Wuhan virus or China virus. And now we're seeing this again, where yesterday there was a clash between Palestinian protesters and I guess pro-Israel protesters, and the post-millennial, the same right-wing rag that tried to write a hit piece on the DA of Portland and myself, that's like run by Andy No and those people, wrote an article about how Palestinians attacked Jews in New York City. And it was all about how, the cops then rushed in and arrested, the Palestinian protesters. So as a Jew, like on speaking from an Asian perspective, as a Jew, I can say that I don't trust this source because they've attacked me already, and I don't trust the cops. So I think it's interesting that this is also going to be used, what's happening in Israel, as an opportunity. Jews are the victims of the most hate crimes in this country. And of course, we're fearful that a lot of people misunderstand that all Jews are not Israel and Israel is not all Jews, and that maybe
Exactly.
anti-Semitism will increase. We are terrified of that. However, the solution is not more cops and allowing the cops to beat the crap out of Palestinian protesters and get involved and only take the side of the people who look like me. And that is what is going to be enabled by what may or may not be happening in places like New York City, resulting from what's happening in Israel.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be used as a tool to promote white supremacy, which is what this bill is.
Well said. Well said. And I was talking about before. I hate it when, as a black man, when like people use the race card to defend Barack Obama and all the horrific war crimes. And I mean, Black Lives Matter started under Barack Obama, and he created a surge in the militarization of the police leading up to Ferguson. So it's like I don't like when people use the race card to deflect criticism of him. So I'm like, I can only sympathize with would it like to be a Jewish ally like yourself, and seeing people use anti-Semitism as a way to silence people. I seen Jewish allies said they have like internalized anti-Semitism for criticizing Israel, and that's why on what she says on the money, because it's actually anti-Semitic to assume that someone has loyalty to Israel because they're Jewish.
100%. This guy was, arguing with me like the other day, telling me that my homeland was Israel. And I'm like, it's not. My homeland is where I was born. Okay. I happen to have been born in this country. That's because of that. That's my homeland. Like, stop. You don't know. Like, you're not even Jewish. Like, what are you talking about? And to what you were saying, Nick, the data is out there that cops are 300% more likely to use violence and their military grade weaponry against leftist protesters than right
Wow.
wing.
Wait, say that again. Say that again.
300% more likely to use violence against
Wow.
us than, for instance, the people who are waltzing into the Capitol building to murder elected officials.
I mean, I'm not surprised by that. It just always still shocking to hear the number.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
dang.
Yep. I mean, it's like, well, I could have guessed it, but to see it in writing is pretty astonishing. So that's another reason why, if you think that militarized police or more police are the answer, if there's going to be more crime against Asian people or Jewish people or Black people, you're wrong, because they're not trying to protect us. They're protecting white supremacy, white people,
Yeah.
rich people, and property.
And there's a great comment by Paul Smith. Paul Smith, I know him a lot. He always leaves good comments. So shout out to Paul. U.S. Police gets its training and police demonstrations from the IDF. That's why I want to mention that, because that's why we brought that up.
Yeah,
I think discussing Israel Palestine is very relevant in discussing the struggle for police abolition.
yeah.
Because
I'd
I
say
covered on my
that,
show, and I passed right to your article because
yeah, go ahead.
the ICC found, and they did an investigation that showed American police the way they treat African Americans constitutes a crime against humanity and violates international law. What does that remind you of?
Yeah.
What you about to say, awkward? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, no, I was just going to say that, you know, I think that, you know, I was born in a place where like I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. And so I was telling Zoya before we went live that like my first form of activism was beating up Nazis. And I learned that wasn't productive. And as an abolitionist, I now understand that anyone can be transformed, and that, you know, most of these people who I considered to be punchworthy were fed generations worth of disinformation and could unlearn what they'd been taught since birth. And however, coming from that and knowing my history of the Holocaust and the pogroms before that, it's like a fear that all Jews have that it could happen again. And it's also the reason why a lot of Jews are such, you know, active allies, because in a way we can relate to the struggles of oppressed peoples, and, you know, marginalized, typically silenced peoples, in this country, Black and brown and indigenous people. And so I think, you know, deep down somewhere, like that's probably how I got involved in the work that I do to begin with, is just this innate connection. Now, having said all of that, whenever I'm talking about police brutality and why we need to abolish the police, someone, I believe in bad faith, responds, well, it's Israel's fault, they trained them. And I think that's, you know, I think that's trying to switch the subject, alter the narrative, you know, take focus away from the fact that policing in this country was created following slavery, around the time of the Black Codes, where they were changing laws and creating new felonies to enable profit to continue off the backs of Black people. It's an inherently American and white supremacist institution. It's only been a number of decades where the NYPD, for instance, and the IDF have worked together, training each other, sharing information and such. So when that's your first response to me talking about American police violence and what we need to do here, my immediate thought is that you're an anti-Semite. However, in the context of today, where we're seeing what Israel is doing, what Israeli cops and military on the grounds of their country are doing to Palestinian people, and how strikingly similar it is to what American cops and the National Guard and you know other feds are doing to Black Americans and brown Americans and protesters on the left who are fighting against fascism, it is a very appropriate thing to talk about. In this context, it absolutely does make sense. And it is worth noting that their behaviors are similar because they trade information, they trade trainings, and also Israel is funded by the United States. There's a reason they vote together in every UN vote. They always vote against everybody else. The US gives them tons of money and all of the military equipment that they're not giving to the cops here.
Well, also, I mean, the whole Galit and like Israel program is to protect American interests for oil. That's what it really comes down to. That is not the fault of Israel. It's our own government's greed. It's our own government that's perpetuating this. This military exchange program started because it was profitable in 1996 to protect the US Olympics, but like then they started sending every police force, not just Atlanta's there, because, well, it actually does cost less to actually have their military train them than ours. And also they get a freebie, like having like Israel protect a lot of the other oil producing countries around the Middle East. It's a US problem.
100%. And it's only certain Jews, right? It's the people in leadership and the ultra Orthodox, who are making these choices in line with the United States' interest. It's not all people in Israel. There are tons of Jews and Palestinians in Israel who live in communities together and are, you know, joining together, protesting the best they can what their government is doing to one half of the people there.
Yeah, and on that note, I want to say that the rich and powerful in every country are controlling and fueling conflicts in absolutely every country. We see it here. You know, just because Trump or Biden does something or Congress does something doesn't mean that us everyday citizens support it.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to add something about, like, under the Obama administration, yeah, it's not a red or blue situation, like Nick said. I mean, part of the 1033 program under Obama, you guys remember the burn grants from 2009 to 2014? That was an $18 billion giveaway to the police, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and the Office of Drug Policy. I mean, a lot of protesters said that it was actually going to contribute to more broken windows policing and less public trust within the community and the police. But the Obama administration said that it was public safety and civil rights liberties training, which would somehow strengthen the position of law enforcement as trusted guardians of public safety, which was totally the opposite. I mean, Black Lives Matter, Ferguson, and like Occupy totally just obliterated all trust that most people had in.
I just want to emphasize the absolute rank corruption that is involved in this, because I want to put it in a very simple terms. So you have weapons manufacturers and you have the defense industry that donates a ton of money to Joe Biden. You have Israel, that's a top leading candidate, leading donator of Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. So look how the game is played. So when you see how U.S. aid is actually given to Israel, that is actually a series of vouchers, and those vouchers is where Israel can pick out weaponry they need from these giant U.S. defense manufacturers. So what's happening is these defense manufacturers are getting rich because this deal the government has bookered. So they donate to Biden for his campaign, help these people get elected. They get elected, and then they work these giant weapons deal that benefits everyone part of the club and enriches his friends, enriches his donors, and then they get the money right back when they donate to the campaigns. It's a giant club, and this same problem exists when it comes to the militarization of the police as well. And you got the police that donates money to politicians. The politician gets in and votes to give them more toys, and people don't see how that's directly corrupt and something that we should have no tolerance for. Because Joe Biden is enriching him and his friends, and this not it goes along the lines like we talk about criminal justice now, and how the defense industry and the prison industrial complex is being enriched because of Joe Biden's policies. But it's the same for healthcare. I mean, he dropped the public option because his healthcare donors helped him win in South Carolina. It's literally just direct corruption that leads to stuff like this. Now, I wanna actually go to the actual demand, because this is the demand here, and then I can get your guys' thoughts on it, because this is number two. This is from the website that you guys should definitely check out, because it's also a good way to learn how to take action. They have a take actions tab here. You guys won't see. I'm gonna put it up so people that are actually watching can see here.
And don't say they, you say we, dummy.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. So this is our website. Number two, demilitarize the police. Um, disarm all law enforcement. You guys can't see it, but I have it for the screen. Let me adjust this here so you guys can see the whole text. There we go. So here's the actual demand I have on the screen here. Disarm all law enforcement, including police. Actually, I can share the screen so you guys can see it. Yeah. Well, actually, I can't do it. I'm not the host. But anyway, I have it for the screen so people watching can see.
Oh, can I do that?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Either way, I like number two. It says disarm all law enforcement, including police officers and security guards. Start immediately with all military grade weaponry and equipment. Enforce abuse of force laws. Make all body and dash cam. Oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to talk about, because this is important. Make all body and dash cam for this public. So even like we have these basic reforms, and we have the new case with Andrew Brown where they just straight up denying release. They refuse to release the body cam, and this is why we ultimately push for abolition, because even we have these reform, they can just refuse to release. Like, how doesn't that defeat the entire point of the body cam reform in the first place? So I like that the fact that you guys said that, make all body cam, like you literally have that in the demand, because you guys acknowledge that even though they have body cams, they can still just hide it from the public, right?
Yeah, and honestly, body cams, as Alec Karakatsanis, who founded and runs Civil Rights Corps, told me on my show recently, or talked about, I should say, was actually something that cops and benevolent associations and foundations and unions pushed for themselves. The reason is because all body cams do is increase the surveillance of the American people. This allows them, in addition to
That's an interesting point.
in addition to the cameras that are already all over our towns and cities, they now have cameras that they can control, that they can point in any direction they want to get a fuller view of everything that we're doing. So they can turn those on when they're just patrolling. They can turn them on when they're on a stakeout. It doesn't matter. It's not just for us to make sure they're not brutalizing us. They clearly continue to do so. And that's why it was a reform that they were pushing, and it was a reform that was touted on both sides of the aisle. But like so many reforms that don't actually chip away at the system, it only made the system stronger. It increased the surveillance state. And to the point you were making, they decide when they turn them on and turn them off. And if they do get recordings, the police decide what's going to be showed to the public, what's going to be shown to the press, what's going to be shown to the families. They doctor videos, they edit videos, they delete and lose videos. So yes, as long as we have police, we should have the body cameras because they're already there. We should not continue to increase funding for body cameras because that money is money that should be coming out of police budgets and put into the communities. But any cameras that are there today should be on 100% of the time for the purposes of not allowing cops to pick and choose when we're getting the video, and all of that video should be public access.
Yeah, I think turning off your body cam should be like a criminal offense.
Absolutely.
And now in hindsight, like I remember thinking at the time, I couldn't believe they actually got that through when that reform became a thing. But now in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense now. Like it makes sense how they was able to get that done because ultimately the cops are still under control, and there's actually not a forfeit of power. They're actually increasing their power, right? And that's a very important point. You said actually increase the surveillance of the state. And then there's a great comment here by Nancy D that says also body cams are being used to collect facial recognition data.
Yes.
Very interesting. But what would you about to say?
Well, to her, I think it was to her, or to their point, that is absolutely true. And we know also from data that facial recognition is incredibly faulty and untrustworthy and used to further target Black and brown people, and of course the poor as well. And this whole thing though about like technology, improving technology and increasing funding for police for these reasons is similar to what they have done with electronic monitoring and expanding probation and parole and when it comes to mass incarceration. There are tons of people in this country who are essentially imprisoned in their own homes who have electronic monitoring that they have to pay for that prevents them from leaving to do anything except work. And, obviously, if they have a record, it's hard to get a job. So they have to choose between feeding their families, going to the doctor, and paying for their own surveillance. And there are tons of people who are in this position who would never have been put in prison before this. So again, it was a reform that was meant to be like a gentler form of genocide. We're instead of putting them in a cage, we're just gonna watch them on the outside. And it sounded good. It sounded like a step in the right direction, but because the courts and the prosecutors never would have pushed to incarcerate these people on low-level crimes, it's actually expanded the population of people under state control.
Yeah, I also want to add that because this system is so thoroughly corrupt that anything we try to do always gets co-opted by the people in power and used against us.
And that's why we have to be so careful about what we put our, what we support as abolitionists. If it is not decarceral in nature, we can't support it. So the George Floyd Act may have been created with good intentions, but it gives $750 million more to police to police themselves. And it doesn't even make what killed George Floyd illegal. So we can't support that. We can support an alternative recommendation like the Breathe Act that actually talks about reallocating funding for carceral punishment into the communities. So that is much more in line with what we at 10 Demands are pushing for.
Yeah, and I just want to also add the main proponent of crime is poverty. You want to stop crime, stop poverty. And that is what defunding the police is all about.
Yeah, we
100.
are actually the serious people in the room, and that's how I like to frame it, because I ask these people to explain how we spend so much money in police budgets, but it is not reducing crime. But when
Yeah.
you look at things that actually reduce crime, things we advocate for, like additional money in healthcare, housing, mental health care, like these kind of things are proven on multiple societies and multiple continents and different cultures to decrease crime. So we're the only one who actually advocating for the real
Yeah.
thing. I
And
have something I want to. What are you about to add there?
well, I was just going to say, to your point, Andrew Yang in New York is like leading the race for mayor. And there was,
Yes, I wanted to talk about him.
yeah, there was a violent attack
Yeah.
in Times Square. The NYPD has the
With
hugest.
that said, before we get into that, because I know we allocated about 30 minutes to talk about this. We about 35 minutes in. I'm down to are you guys down to just stay hang out a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, I only want to say that because I'm not. There's no rush. So if you
Yeah.
guys, we can shoot the shit on a few topics and
Yeah.
takes a few questions. But go ahead, man. I didn't even cut you out. I just want to
No, cool. And
clarify that
yeah,
I'm down to. I want to talk about gang too. I want to give you guys thoughts because I have something I want to talk. I have another story I have prepared, but continue,
well, as
brother.
it relates to this directly, there was a violent crime in Times Square. Violent crime happens. It doesn't happen nearly as much as low-level nonviolent crimes that are the cause of our prisons being so overcrowded, but it can happen. And even in abolitionist society, it will. It's impossible to it would be impossible to have a world where that was perfect. And that's not what abolitionists are recommending. It's kind of kind of having the most human flourishing as humanly possible. And that is what abolition would enable. But so this crime happens in Times Square, and Andrew Yang, one of the two cop candidates, says, well, that's just proof that we can't defund in New York. We need more police. It's actually the opposite. My response to him is, hey, moron, the New York City has the most cops. Times Square has the most cops in New York City, and the crime happened anyway. So what makes you think that adding to it would make it stop? That's not what caused the crime. It's
That's
not a lack of cops. So
it's so crazy how they keep repeating that. They repeat this same dumb logic, and for the last few months, I've just been like debunking whenever I see someone in the media say stuff. They're like, "Oh well, the crime rate is soaring, and how you gotta want to defund the police?" I'm like, "That's evidence for that's
yeah,
literally
literally,
what we talking about." Sorry,
yep.
what you about to say something? Wasn't you, Ann?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually had some issues actually about that because I actually lived under Bloomberg, who actually his successor or his predecessor, Giuliani, they were both law and order candidates. They were like conservative Republicans who increased police budgets, and their idea of reducing crime was more police. But really, you found out that they were behind the scenes. Kind of talked about the body cams. They were manipulating schedules. They were hiding police stats. They were forcing quotas. I mean, there's a whole documentary on Hulu called Protect and Serve about this. And there's also the case of Adrian Schoolcraft, the whistleblower in Brooklyn, who actually got put into a mental institution exposing this. And when I lived under Bloomberg, I did not stop crime. I had a roommate who actually was a young man. He was African American. He got stopped 3 times. He was an engineer with a master's degree. He got stopped by studying at the library at his school. And they said they checked his backpack 4 times. He went ballistic the 4th time he got detained because he told the cops to go fuck themselves. And he got detained just for that.
Man, I'm like Eric Adams terrifies me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely terrifies me. And Andrew Yang, and
Mm-hmm.
with a more recent comment, he had another comment where he was discussing mental health. If you guys give me a moment, I could find it and we can because it's actually pretty insane. But what was you about to say? Awkward.
Well, I'll just say, while you're looking for it, what An was just talking about is exactly the story that that was told related to the murder of Eric Garner. Ramsey Orta, his friend who filmed Eric Garner's murder, was so used to being stopped and frisked and abused and arrested on petty bullshit by the police, that literally every time he walked out of his house, he had his phone in his hand with the camera ready to be turned on because he was afraid this was going to happen. So the only reason we know about what happened to Eric Garner to the extent that we do is because it was destined to happen. They couldn't leave their house without being harassed, targeted, profile harassed, and beaten up. And so he was able to film that video. And of course, many of us know what happened to Ramsey after that. The police trumped up charges on him. They threw him in jail, and then they tried to poison him when he was there because he had evidence of their wrongdoing.
Yeah, and
sorry, go ahead, Zoya.
I'm just chiming in on this. Fear is a way that societies are controlled, and we are definitely all propagandized by media to fear people and fear crime, so that we surrender our rights, and it happens slowly. So we think we're going to get protection from police, but the data shows that police do not solve or prevent crime. And in fact, when citizens are rising up in order to try to get a sense of justice for themselves, economically, racially, and on all points, right now, what we're seeing is the police are being weaponized to oppress us, to oppress any dissent, to oppress our right to protest and to speak out on these issues. And people just are so scared of defunding the police. But I implore you, white people, rich people, everybody, please understand the police do not protect you.
Yeah. William Upsky Wimsat, I think in No More Prisons, maybe in Bomb the Suburbs, but I think in his book No More Prisons, said we need a cool rich kids movement. And that's absolutely true. If you're privileged, own that privilege and leverage it for good.
Sorry, don't mind me. I was trying to see because my friend Rome may join us. Since we just kind of
on that
hanging out.
note,
What was that? Go ahead.
Something you can do, if you aren't rich but you are a cool kid, you can't get out to protest, you can't afford to give to mutual aid in your area or whatever it may be. Like Nick was saying before, there is a take action page on our site. And all you have to do is use your phone to send a text, and you can direct an open letter about starting this process toward abolition and why, to your mayor, your state or federal congressperson, or your state governor.
Well said. Well said. So, I mean, at this point, this kind of just turned to a live. So you guys we allocate 30 minutes, so you guys are free to leave whenever you guys want. But I think this is a good transition to what I want to talk about, because I mentioned earlier, I posted this in the chat if you want to screen share it. This is what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about Biden increasing the flow of military equipment. This is an article from Jacobin. I think this is from a few weeks ago. You guys can see if I have it on the stream. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can check it out. And this is how. Let me move the screen a little bit so you guys see it. It said Joe Biden could easily be called the billions in military equipment the police received from the Pentagon. And I remember when this story first came out, the excuse was like, "Oh, he just this is something that Trump set in motion, and Trump is why there's an increase of military aid." But what they're leaving out is, and this is what this article is covering, is that Biden could just easily just end the program if he wanted to. So it's like what politicians, and not just what they do, it's what they don't do, which says a lot. Like if this is something that was important to Biden for the Democratic Party it would just end just like this, just like that. So I don't know if you see it, Arthur, but I think I posted this article in the chat just so you guys know what I'm talking about, and you can share if you want. But this is how they talk about how it just gives more detail into the 1033 program, and we have some graphs here. Let me pull it up back for the screen for you guys to see. This goes over the vehicles transferred to the police through the 33 program. And according to this, it's go back since 1997. Do you guys see that on
Yeah.
according to everyone? Do you guys
No,
see it?
that's really interesting because it's not only saying that the stuff that I said earlier about like changing the laws and stuff, but he can actually recall the equipment
Yeah,
that they have.
yeah, that's very interesting as well. Let's see. Let's actually dive into this. It said nearly 34 million in military equipment was sent to police the first quarter. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said that Joe Biden was increasing the flow. Like this is during Joe Biden, and when this happened, everyone was raising flags because this is something that Joe Biden could easily stop. According to the Pentagon's latest figures, this is what they talk about since 1997. And this is what you brought up earlier, Awkward, with the 1.8 billion in combat gear being shipped. And now we just see a little bit more graphs and details here. Um, Not surprisingly, arming police to the teeth makes them more violent. That's what we just broke down, right? Um, Law enforcement agencies that get combat gear through the 1033 program tend to shoot and kill more people than ones who don't. I think one of you guys said that. I think you guys did.
Yeah, but this is good.
Yeah, this is very, very interesting stuff. Like I said, I think I covered this on my show before, but it's still always good to go over this.
Yeah.
But you see the graphs here, the firearm transfer to the police. I just want to go over this because I saw this too. I wanted to add this to back up what I was saying here. You guys, anything you guys want to add to this that you guys see in the article?
No, but I'm glad you highlighted it. I would definitely I can include this somewhere, like in our YouTube video.
Yeah, language barring police from having most military gear was included in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, but its fate is uncertain. Well, I don't know what the point of the article. I thought it was actually saying something interesting, but I don't think that's pretty interesting. I don't think that's relevant. Um, because only because the article is older. Anyway, yeah, this is a good article.
Oh,
I'll put it in. I'll put it in.
dude,
I'll put it in the
I
comment.
didn't.
What was that?
Steven Simler is the one who wrote this. Okay, he's a big supporter of 10 demands,
Oh,
and
really?
he sends us stuff on the 1033 program all the time. If we weren't, if like our plan for this series wasn't to, feature the 10 demands creators talking about why we created it, I would have invited him. I was literally, that's, I'm not surprised at all he wrote this.
We probably we
You
should
should invite
organize.
him on.
We should organize a conversation. Like
Yeah.
well, we can have a roundtable.
Yeah.
I need to talk to him because this is a good article that I put up, and this is since I have things receipts. I usually like to back up what I was saying. This is what Yang was saying. I'm sharing it on the screen. I see that you actually comment under this as well, so I think you know what
I
I'm
did
referring to. Yeah, this
in
is
the
Andrew.
article.
This is Andrew Yang. This is May 14th.
Oh,
He said, "I believe this is what I was referring to earlier, just so people know I was just not saying stuff for no reason." It's Andrew Yang said, "I believe in mental health, but if you have someone who's mentally ill on the subway, you're going to need a police officer or at least present. At least present in a proximity to help improve the situation." What? And then your comment here just said wrong again, Andrew Yang. And I like this comment right beneath, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Awkward is because this kind of this guy actually brings the receipts right here on why it's stupid what he just said. It said people with untreated mental illness 16 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. Half of people killed by police have a disability report. And Andrew Yang said we need a police officer for in those situations. What's your guys' thoughts on
yeah. I mean,
that?
it's because he is can't think outside of the prison box and the handcuffs. Like, the belief that a police officer keeps us safe. They're the ones who escalate situations and kill people. So yeah, I mean, I think it's completely the opposite. And that's what with abolition and defunding we would do is replace people who are heavily militarized, are on a power trip, not trained to de-escalate, and basically enabled by things like qualified immunity to just kill people with actual professionals who know how to deal with people experiencing mental health crises.
Yeah, I mean, it makes as much sense as saying that you need to call in a police officer during a heart surgery. You for a medical issue, you need someone that's trained and has the right skill set to deal with that medical issue. So that's what we need to fund. You do not need militarized police at these instances.
Absolutely, and I actually clicked on the article. It's like, man, when they put it in context, it's even more infuriating. I clicked the article that someone commented in there. Let me put it on the screen so the audience can see what I'm talking about. It said this is the one where it said people with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. Check this out, because this put this in pretty content. Numbering fewer than they are 1 out of 50 U.S. adults, right? But 1 out of 4 as many half of fatal police shootings. What? And they explain here. This is because unfortunately propaganda fooled people into thinking that police are allies of the mentally ill, just like Andrew Yang is alluding to here, because people believe that when there's a mental health issue that you call the police. That's what you do, and then the police come and they make it worse.
Yep.
And that's just look at that article. That's actually insane. And that just show how out of touch that like the capitalist brain, and that's what Yang is. That's the capitalist brain. The first instinct they have is authority to solve this problem. And another story I wanted to cover, I think this transition to that pretty well, is how I'm gonna pull the source up here so you guys know what I'm talking about. How Andrew Yang he recently, like, people think we don't like the left is like piling up on Yang for no reason. He gives us a lot of reason because he was signing with Bill De Blasio. Because Bill De Blasio, here's a tweet right here. I'll put it up for the screen. This is a tweet. Audience can see it. He said this is the bill. The tweet said Bill De Blasio said he's add 250 more police officers to the subway. They're doing this under the guise of preventing anti-agent violence, kind of what we explained earlier. And Yang was saying this is a step in the right direction, and I've been calling for this since February. And he's once again he said our recovery began with people feeling safe to ride the subways and walk the streets. Long story short, this is under the guise of fighting anti-police violence. Now, I'm gonna pass it to Awkward and On and get your guys' thoughts, but I want to propose you guys, and for anyone who's watching, if you don't know what's inherently wrong with this, but when I'm reporting this, let me ask you this: do you think those cops really gonna stop the rise of anti-Asian violence, or do you think those additional cops are gonna just harass Black people, working class people, and continue to impose regressive taxes?
Yeah.
Actually, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, On and then Awkward. We can do it that way.
Well, as a New Yorker, and I actually see cops like at my stop all the time when I go on the subway. Okay, the cops even harass Asian people. Like, they have looked at me as I like go through like the turnstile, and like they're staring as I take my phone out of my bag to like just swipe to go through the turnstile. And they actually like I don't feel safe riding an elevator with like five large armed cops. And I'm a small person, if you guys can't already tell. I'm like 5'3", 110 pounds. The cops are like 300 pounds and they're like 6 foot something. I do not feel safer with them around. If anything, I feel more nervous. And two, like we always see on the left, follow the money. Andrew Yang's top advisors are Liz Smith, who worked for Pete Buttigieg, and Bradley Tusk, who worked for Bloomberg, worked for Uber, and was a consultant for the Benevolent Police Association, which was an NYPD police union. I mean, both Bloomberg and Buttigieg under their mayoral reigns were actually very pro law and order, and actually very racist and very like just not good for their cities. And these are the people Andrew Yang is hiring. And I don't understand why some people who call themselves progressive don't see that and are ignoring that.
Yeah, like Yang people, like I have a good friend. I have a few friends that peeled from Yang gang. My good friend Mark. I remember I met him because he was like legitimately curious why I didn't like Yang. Those people I got a lot of respect for. But then there's like the Yang gang that's like, it almost like they bought into the cult of personality. Like, even there's one progressive idea he had, and it wasn't even that progressive. And that's UBI. and it didn't have to be this way if Yang would pivot to the left, because I think he's a career opportunist. I think he would say whatever it takes to advance his career. He made a career miscalculation. The calculation he made was, if I pivot right, that will help my career. How is that going for you? Because even with you pivoting right, even with you apologizing for Biden and endorsing him over Bernie, they still hate you. Like, they still doing everything they can to destroy your campaign. One second. So okay, on that, there's this article. Yeah, the sound went off for a little bit. I think I just fixed it. I want to give you guys thoughts on this, because this kind of go over the propaganda. Check this
Mhm.
out, because we know that Eric Adams. So I'm struggling to get this link.
He's a cop, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
cop, right? He's a
Yeah.
cop. He supports stop and frisk to this day. To this day, he still supports stop and frisk. And they're not letting me open this. They did an article that I'm struggling to put this up. One second. But with the New York Post, they pretty much was like, Eric Adams, he's the guy on criminal justice. Like, what? Like, this is literally his weakest. There you go. I found it. This is from the New York Post. So we can't expect anything good out of them in the first place. I'm actually, I'll put it in the chat so you guys can see it. So you guys can open it up. There you go. So I know that the audio cut out just a little bit. So for you guys who don't know, I was talking about Eric Adams, and I'm in this story here. This from the New York Post. On crime, Eric Adams remains head and shoulders above the mayoral pack. And to this day, in the year 2021, Eric Adams still supports stop and frisk. How crazy is that? Now you got propaganda saying, and then they're using they're like, New York crime rates getting worse each day and night. Once again, that backs up our point about, because even though you guys are putting a lot of money into NYPD, it's not improving the situation.
Right.
So it's this racist is like, it tears my heart up, because like Morales with her position, she took the bold stance of we should fund the NYPD less. She should be dominant in this race, but every single candidate is awful on this issue. Yang tank because of Israel Palestine, but Eric Adams is just as bad. But
Yeah.
he's not an idiot like Yang to put like a statement at the time he did.
Yep.
Because that was
Sadly,
like,
they're leading though. Adams
yeah,
and
it's
Yang. It's
terrifying.
gross.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not in New York, but I'm terrified for black men in New York. And now we got someone who's unapologetically supportive of stop and frisk that's going to be in charge. And Bloomberg, and you mentioned Bloomberg before, he openly said he and viewed the NYPD as his private militia. Now
Yeah.
imagine someone who is crazy and pro police state as Eric Adams with a private militia like the NYPD. And he said, not only did he say he supports stop and frisk, he said we should do more of it.
He's the second coming of Giuliani, really. I mean, anyone who lived under Giuliani was even worse than Bloomberg in terms of law and order. So
Here you go. I found the article. Sorry, I'm all over the place, guys, but I got it here now. This is just to show what I was talking about. I kind of want to play this video, but I'm not sure if it's good or not. um, Maybe that'd be. But anyway, this is what I'm referring to when it says Eric Adams calls stop and frisk policy a great tool. Um, and this is the interview. I think I could play this interview. Here, I'll send you the link, awkward, so you guys so you can screen share it. Because I want you guys to know what I'm talking about. I think this is pretty relevant. And then I think we can take some questions and let's see. We about an hour in, so yeah, we take some questions. I think we can wrap up. You got 30 minutes. 30
Well,
minutes
as soon as my wife comes up and tells me I'm over, then I have to go.
Okay, so how much time do you guys think you have?
It could be. I mean, I don't have a lot. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's fine. So we wrap up in like 10, 15 minutes. If you want, if I'll put a link here. You want screen share that, awkward?
Is it which one? The New York Post?
Yeah,
New York Local.
Yeah. That way you guys can see the video too.
Hold on.
And if you should scroll down a little bit, that shows that has the video.
Hold on one sec.
In regards to the law and order thing, I watched an awesome documentary that actually was saying how Republicans were running on law and order for decades and they were winning. And then Democrats pivoted to running on law and order too and started also winning. So we have two parties that run on law and order, and it just leads to oppression of citizens.
Do you mean this watch?
Yeah. You want to play that video right there? Because I think this is the video where we talk about stop and frisk.
Now's your chance to get an amazing deal on this.
Oh, Jesus. Let's mute this. Let's see what the comments are saying before they say that. Rabbit Fufu said Andrew Yang is a Pete Buttigieg sociopath. This is why you guys understand. This is my problem with Yang. You guys understand that Pete Buttigieg was to the left of Andrew Yang on healthcare? Because Medicare for All, who wanted it, was essentially a public option. Andrew Yang didn't even support a public option on his healthcare plan. He supported a series of vouchers. The same way that Biden supports Cobra. That what Yang would support. That's to the right of what Pete Buttigieg was supporting. Here we go. The ad is over. Let's check this video out.
New York City's next mayor, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams.
See what happens if you bitch screen it.
NYPD for 22 years, retiring as a captain. He then began a second career in politics. Let's get the point of view from the son of a butcher who now doesn't eat meat.
Son of a butcher.
President Eric Adams. But you never go.
I love that. You know, we're color coordinated.
We're color coordinated, but I bet you didn't expect.
Oh, he's such a weasel. I hate politicians.
Amen.
Run for mayor. What is your campaign going to be based on? What arguments are you going to make to get New Yorkers to vote for you as opposed to all the other people who want the job?
I think the transformative period of the time, even when you look at the coronavirus crisis, what do we need for the...
I haven't seen the full video. I've seen the clip of him saying that, but I think this is the video he says it as well. How long is it? 10 minutes?
Too long.
Oh, it is pretty long. This is I remember this is the interview where he says it because I remember I found a shorter clip on Twitter. I think I spare people watching this whole thing. It's gonna be pretty. I was hoping there would be a smaller clip, but anyway, they had a quote here. I'm gonna spare you guys a full interview. Here, I'll pull the quote up though.
Yeah, who wants to watch?
I actually thought that was the I'm literally watching that for like 30 seconds. My blood was boiling. And he said,
"Here's one thing."
Oh yeah, so this is the actual quote, and I'll pass it right to you. And this is on Stop and Frisk. I'm trying to find the very beginning. He said, Brooklyn Borough's President Eric Adams says NYPD's much maligned stop and frisk policy is good if used properly and should be continued. He said it's a great tool. Filler there. He said used it often. It's a great tool. We should have never removed stop and frisk, Adams says. Adams, well, that's more fluff there for article, but yeah, that's what I was referring to earlier when I say Eric Adams is pro stop and frisk, and he doesn't even hide it. Yeah. I remember, I still think Bloomberg is supportive of it, but even he during the primary was like, oh no, I think it was a bad move. I don't think we should do it no more. I didn't believe him, but even he acknowledged that you can't run on it anymore. Eric Adams is so bad that he's like, yeah, it's a good idea. Of course. It's crazy.
They're trying to sell it to us right now, using a black man. They're weaponizing identity politics.
Absolutely.
He's gone as far to say that he will carry a gun into a synagogue, a church, wherever he goes. So people who vote for him want an armed NYC mayor. Think about that. He actually said that he was going to bring a gun into a church, a synagogue, a school, wherever he went to protect people.
Wonderful.
I'm looking for some because they're not hard to find. I'm looking for numbers on stop and frisk because I reported on before like how
and more
disastrous
tonight
it
on the
is.
tension between police
Where
and the
the hell did that come
minority.
from? I'm just trying to find some content so I can get it right. I just found this article now. Looking, I'll pull it up for the screen.
Go to the New York Civil Liberties site.
Do you have a quick reference that you want to put in the chat?
I mean, according to the NYPD's annual reports, which are going to be less than they really are, in 2019, there were 13,500 stops. 66% were innocent, 59% were Black, 29% were Latin American, and 9% were white.
So there it is. So
and
that's
100% were victims of the system.
Yep. And this is the article I just pulled up. This is Philadelphia.
Honestly,
I didn't even know that Philadelphia had one.
Just so you know, like that was just the last year that they did it. I mean, other years, like here, hold on. From 2003, 87% innocent, 2004, 89, 2005, 89, 2006, 90, 2007, 87, 2008, 88, 2009, 88, 2010, 86, 2011, 88. Like it just goes on and on. Like that was a really low year. That was actually the lowest recorded year of percent innocent. And of course, we don't even know what that means. Like they could, like if the person was like found to be jaywalking, they could say they weren't innocent. You know what I mean? So, and then you look at the fact that, that they're Black people in the country at least represent 13% of the population, and 60 to 70% of the people stopped.
Yeah, this is some information that I found while I was looking. I actually didn't know that they had a stop and frisk policy in Philadelphia. So this is from April 2021, this year. And it said, and this is when they did analysis of their stop and frisk policy that I didn't even know they had there. It said Black Philadelphians are 3 times more likely as white Philadelphians to be stopped by the police. And this was an analysis of 2.8 million pedestrian traffic stops. So this is some more recent data that kind of outlines what Awkward was referring to. So yeah, this is literally like stop and frisk is just is a way for them to have an excuse to target disenfranchised community and impose their regressive taxes. Because one thing I always bring up, and when I tie issues together, and then we can wrap it up after this segment, because I always bring up how there's a giant racial income inequality gap, and the regressive taxes imposed by our criminal justice system plays a giant part of that. So when you have stop and frisk, when you have broken windows policing, and these things that target like disenfranchised communities and the Black community, it make it more likely where we be the victims of things like civil asset forfeiture, for example. So when I was writing my article, I looked like they don't do a lot of national data. If you have something, I probably missed it. But I was looking in like local area, and whenever I look in local area with civil asset forfeiture, like it always targets the Black community around 60 to 70% of the time, and that plays a role in racial income inequality because of stuff like stop and frisk. So that's what we have. That is what we deal with if Eric Adams wins. He is the person who is in the lead right now, and he's unapologetically supporting of that. And now there's a wave of people supporting the police state because of January 6th. Now we saw the police get more money because of that. So it's only gonna get worse. Now they got their justification of funding police more, and now Eric Adams is gonna have that giant budget. I want to give all you guys the last word here because I think we're about 70 minutes in. I'm glad you guys stick around with me. But I'll give you guys one last thing that you guys either want to bring up, plug. It could be anything, but I want to start with On. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to bring up? Any last words that you have before we wrap up here on this live?
Well, I mean, we're supposed to be a nonpartisan, non-sectarian group, but if you actually are listening to our mayoral discussion of New York City, I mean, please rank Diane Morales as number one. I mean, she's the only person who's going to who actually is talking about defunding the police, and not she's actually running on stopping ICE raids. I mean, and then just that's all. We can't let a cop and a pro law and order and the other pro law and order candidate Yang win. That's all.
Well said. Like I said, like I'm an advocate of taking our shots, and even if you're disillusioned with this electoral politics, which you have a lot of reasons to be, I don't see any good reason not to rank Diane Morales number one. Like to me, I think that's something that's just an easy, effortless step that you can take, even if you're not into electoral politics. Zoya, what do you have? You got anything you want to end this say before we end?
I wanted, if it's possible, to finish reading the
Oh
actual
yeah, go ahead.
demand.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Let's actually. I forgot that I cut off like halfway. If you want to do that, Zoya, you want to go ahead and actually wrap up.
I can pick it up where you left off, and then I
Okay.
have some personal thoughts.
Okay.
And the federal 1033 program, which we've been discussing, that provides military weaponry to local police departments, passed HR 1714, the Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act, require all burn grants be used for non-carceral alternatives to incarceration instead of police department militarization, and all grants from the Department of Homeland Security, Joint Terrorism Task Force, FBI, and Federal Justice Department, and all Pentagon giveaway defense appropriations, and all militarized international police training exchange programs, cancel all police and government contracts with private and public institutions that develop surveillance technologies, establish national, state, and local legal restrictions to prevent police departments from purchasing or using military weaponry. That's the end of the demand. I wanted to just say, on the note of electoral politics, I completely understand anyone that's disillusioned with the process, and there's lots of reasons for it. The system is extremely corrupt, and any concerns people have are absolutely valid. But I want to say, in my decades of activism, one of the things that we were doing was marijuana legislation here in California. And we did get a lot of things passed. And because the system is corrupt, we didn't get them passed the way we wanted them to be passed. Local growers, mom and pop shops were targeted and put out of business. So, of course, it got co opted and perverted into something it was never intended to be. But we got tens of thousands of people out of jail for weed.
That's
So
significant.
you have to keep fighting and not get discouraged. And electoral politics does matter. It absolutely matters. It affects people. People's fathers came home. So as much as we didn't get everything we wanted, which we will not get without direct action in this corrupt system, we still have to do the electoral in order to get people into positions of power, so that when we do apply the grassroots pressure, we have allies there ready to implement the change that we are fighting for. So I would ask people to not get discouraged. Local level politics impact change exponentially faster. But if you are completely done with electoral politics, I also want to emphasize that there's a lot of debate on the left over strategy, which strategy is valid or best or whatever that is. And I think that mentality is regressive. Any way that you want to impact change, go ahead and do it. You want to grow a
Yes.
local garden, you want to
Well said.
get involved, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, all the more power to you. As long as you are doing something that helps the people, you are doing something that's correct. However you approach change, we don't need to test it, we don't need to grade it, we don't need to have a best approach. There's no such thing.
Well said. I mean, that's very well said. We had this debate on our show a lot. And my position on this has been very, very consistent. I always believe that we should take our shots, and that's why I also like that you preface what you said, that you understand people who are disenfranchised by and disillusioned by electoral politics. Because the thing is, the politicians need to earn your support. Like you don't. Nina Turner needs to own. She needs to earn your support. Like like no one is like own your support. So if you look at like the Justice Democrats, for example, and you don't find them to be worthy of supporting, I understand that. That makes sense to me. If there's someone that's running in your local area and you have no reason to believe they're corrupt, and they support you on all the issue. To me, even if you don't like this electoral politics, I think it's kind of silly not to at least vote for them. You don't have to like volunteer. You don't have to donate. Because my stance is we should take all our shots, and that's not me putting a lot of stock in electoral politics. Because people are like, oh, you put a lot of stock in electoral politics. Like, no, I just think we should take our shots where it's available, and this is just one avenue in which we can do that. And I quit my job to canvass and for Bernie Sanders. And even though I have this stance on electoral politics, I still wouldn't take that back. Why do I say that? Because I believe now that electoral politics is a mechanism in which we can radicalize people. So if you have a campaign, you can canvass in communities because that's what I was doing when I was canvassing for Bernie. Is I was actually just talking to people and getting them to acknowledge that our government does not represent them. So even though I was engaging in electoral politics, I was dragging people out of the two-party duopoly mindset. I was radicalizing people and getting them to acknowledge what we need to have done. So yeah, electoral politics is not going to save us, but you can use that as an avenue to affect change. Just one of many things like Zoya said, I strongly agree with what you're saying. And the people who would say we shouldn't focus on electoral politics at all, they would say, oh, we just should focus on mutual aid. Yeah, I agree. I think mutual aid is very important as well. And that should be something that you should be focused on. One thing I would say, and I'll pass it to Awkward here very soon, is that you got to understand that not everyone is in the position that you may personally be in. Like we have a friend that can host a fundraiser, for example, Rome. He traveled the country, does amazing work doing that. Not everyone is in a position to do that. There's some people that struggle from intense anxiety, social anxiety, and social disorders. So the implication that the only way that you can inflict change is to be out in the street, it's almost ableist in the way that not everyone can do that. So if you're a person who, for whatever means, cannot do that kind of stuff, and electoral politics is your only mechanism, there's nothing wrong with that. That's my point. There's some people that can engage in mutual aid. There's some people that can be in the street. There's some people that can't. So we gotta encourage people to do whatever they think is best, and we can nudge them in the right direction. But I see people that are like just straight out shut out electoral politics. I think you gotta be a little bit nuanced. That's my position. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to get awkward in here. What's your last thoughts? Any last thing you want to talk about? Anything you want to plug in particular?
I think everyone's really said it well. I'll just say that if you want to get in touch with us, if you have any questions about demilitarization specifically, the militarization in the first place, about defunding, what abolition means, or how you can take action in your local community, you can tag us on Twitter. It's 10 Demands. You can email us at info@10forjustice.com.
I want to say one last thing that Nick reminded me of, just to emphasize the point. I would really love to see people focusing their energy on change. Whatever change you think is the best, or whatever strategy you think is the best, do that. It is not a contest. We do not need to compete each other or battle each other. We need to battle this system.
That is a great way to. That's a great positive send off message. I mean, what like I criticize the crap out of the squad. Like I even Corey Bush. But let me tell you guys something. If you disagree with me on this, fine. But I will vote for Corey Bush over Josh Hawley any day of the week. And I live in Missouri. Like that's not even a close decision. And if you're like, oh, I will never vote for the squad, I understand. But to me, if Corey Bush ran against Josh Hawley, that's an easy decision for me. Anyway, that just kind of ties a little bit more into that. Thank you guys for watching. We're going to do this more often because we still got 8 more demands to cover. We
Yes,
want to cover
do.
the first 2. Like, this went longer than we have planned, but I think we just have fun just shooting the shit near the end. But we still have 8 demands that we're going to cover. So you guys are going to see more of Awkward On and Zoya. I appreciate you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for watching us at the Freyhampton Leftists. We still have a lot of great content coming up. I'm very excited because my boy JB Font, he's going to be interviewing Richard Medhurst on Sunday.
Nice.
And this is a great time because Medhurst has been amazing on the issue of Israel-Palestine. That's why keep actually hit the bell and keep your eye out for videos because we upload every day and we got a lot of great guests coming down the line. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Left is great, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love it too.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for
Freyhampton
having us.
Leftists. This is Social Summit. Sign out. Take care, guys.